Okay, Ralph is our arranges all of our classes, and he's going to introduce our speaker or our instructor for today. Ralph.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm glad you could join us, and this is going to be a first for the Sun City Huntley Computer Club. Tonight, our host, our instructor, is over 700 miles away from us on this Zoom session, and many of you know Will Gertig. He did a lot of stuff, a lot of classes. He fixed a lot of computers when he was here in Huntley, but he decided the taxes were too high, so he moved to Georgia. And he told me when he moved, he said, I still will be able to do some classes, but I'm not going to come back. I'm going to have to do it by Zoom. So anyway, Will, we really appreciate it, and we'll welcome Will Gertig to our first Zoom class when he's 700 plus miles away.
Thank you very much, Ralph, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you again and do what I really love to do. I love teaching. So tonight's session is on Libre Office. So I'm going to take the screen over and we'll start going through the presentation. Let me do screen. And I will share, and now let me go and open the presentation. Okay. I'm going to get this out of the way. Okay. So as I mentioned just a few months ago, we're going to do an introduction to Libre Office. Now, Libre Office is a multifunctional office productivity tool. We're going to talk a little bit about what Libre Office is and go through some common questions. And then we're going to talk about some of the parts of Libre Office. One is called Writer, another one's called Calc, and another one's called Impress. Now, these are probably the most commonly used items that you'll be using in LibreOffice, but I'll be talking about a number of the other ones as well. Okay, so let's begin by first talking, what is LibreOffice? Well, LibreOffice is an office productivity suite, which means it is a bunch of software products that are integrated. That means they can be used together to accomplish office productivity tasks. Things like word processing, like financial sheets, like presentations, like databases. All of these things are commonly used in an office productivity suite. Probably the most commonly known office productivity suite is Microsoft Office. Microsoft Office, though, has some pretty significant charges associated with it. One big difference is LibreOffice is completely free. I don't know how they get away with it, but it looks similar to Microsoft, an older version of Microsoft Office, and it works just as well. So we're going to go through some of this. It's one of the tools that the club recommends instead of going to spend the money for Microsoft Office products, and it can be used for writing Christmas letters, for doing budgets, for doing spreadsheets, for doing presentations. In fact, tonight's presentation is written using LibreOffice presentation tool, which is called Impress. So how do you get LibreOffice? Well, it's really simple. You go to LibreOffice.org and download it. It's free, and it's a complete download. When you install it in your PC, it installs all the portions of it, including the help sections. So it's a free download. It'll take a little bit of time to download it because it's a fairly good size. So if you've got a high-speed internet, it'll take you a couple of minutes. If you've got a lower speed, it's going to take you a little while. Just be patient. It will download and install itself. Now, is there a cost to use LibreOffice? No, there's not. That's one of the really nice things about it, is that it's completely free. It costs you nothing, and you can use it as long as you want to. In fact, For as long as you have the product, you are entitled to free upgrades. So if it's free, how do you get support? Well, that's one of the nice things about this. LibreOffice is what we call open source software. So it is actually supported by a lot of volunteers that help people understand how to use LibreOffice. There's a lot of help documents that have been written about how to use it, and the help internally is very extensive. So say, for instance, you want to learn how to do a mail merge. That means combine a database into a form letter and have that information put in the person's name, their address, their salutation, and bits and pieces within that email that are personalized. You can do that with a mail merge, and it's possible to do it with LibreOffice. Is it as easy to do as Microsoft Office? I don't think so, but that's actually very advanced work. So if you're willing to go through a little bit of extra effort and learn how to do it within the help sections, or take advantage of some of the videos that are used for training, you can absolutely learn how to do a mail merge or any of the other types of things. Now, what we're going to go through tonight is some of the commonly used parts and some of the absolute basics for three of the most commonly used parts. One of them is called Writer, which is the word processor. Another one's called Calc, which is their spreadsheet financial tool. And the third one's called Impress, which is the presentation tool. There are more parts that come with it, and I'll show you that in just a second. So we're going to open LibreOffice in just a few minutes and then talk about the first page that opens. That tool is called Chooser, and it makes a lot of sense as to why it's called Chooser when we open it up. Are you always required to open Chooser, or can you launch directly into a specific part of LibreOffice? You can go either way, and I'll show you how to do both. Okay, so let me go and launch the Chooser. I've got to close this right now because I've got LibreOffice open, and I want to see what happens when you launch it from the basic tool by itself. Okay, so I'm going to go, and I'm using Windows 11. So those of you that haven't seen it yet, I've done some minor changes to my screen here for Windows 11, but it's going to look a little bit different than what you've got. So I'll go to my applications, and I'll go up to the All Apps section, and I'll scroll down to the letter L for Libre. And there it is. And you see when I click this little down arrow, I'm going to get several choices. I get the LibreOffice, which is my chooser, and then I get several other parts. I get a database, the Calc spreadsheet tool, a drawing tool, Impress, which is the presentation tool, a math functionality tool, and Writer, which is the word processing tool. I'm going to open the main tool, which is opening the chooser. Now, I'm going to make this nice and large so you can see it. The chooser opens with several things. First off, you've got an ability to click on the file and open a brand new something. So I can open a brand new text document or a spreadsheet or a presentation. These would be new documents that I'm creating. I could also open an existing one, or I can go and take a look at my recent documents. Now, these happen to show the recent documents that I have opened in LibreOffice. This is the same thing that's available in Microsoft Office, where you get your most recent documents showing. I can also open some templates, which are templates that are predefined for Writer, for Calc, and for Impress. I can also manage those if I choose to. From this chooser, I can open a blank Writer document, a blank Calc spreadsheet, and a blank Impress presentation. I can also do a drawing function, do some work in the math section, and do some work in the database. These three are not very commonly used. And in fact, the drawing function is something that's unique to LibreOffice, as is the math functionality. There is a database tool in Microsoft Office It's called Access. Very few people actually use the database programs, generally in favor of other tools. So you can see the chooser. It helps you do some other things. I want to show you the tools section though. In this area are the options for how I can customize LibreOffice. Now I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you one specific thing because this will be an area where you would probably want to make some changes. Again, I went to this by going to the tools option, and then I selected customize. Options. All right. Now, when I go here, I'll go scroll down here a little bit. There's a lot of kinds of general things you can take a look at, view, printing, some of the file paths. There's pretty advanced stuff. But where I'm going to go to is what's called the load and save areas. So if I want to load and save something, if I've got a document type, like I'm going to write a letter, I'm going to be using Writer. Writer is pre-programmed to save this document as what's called an ODF text document, okay? It has an ODT extension. You kind of see that right there. It says star.odt. That version can only be opened by LibreOffice. Now, that doesn't make it very compatible with the rest of the world, okay? LibreOffice is very compatible with the rest of the world in terms of their file format. So a LibreOffice tool can open a Microsoft Office file, but not vice versa. So what we usually suggest is we suggest that when you are doing a text document, you save it instead of an ODF text document, you save it as a Word 2003, a .doc, or you can save it as a, I don't even see it in here. There it is, .docx. I don't even see it in here. Interesting.
Yeah, it's
There
right
it is,
above.
right there, a .x. Okay, that means that when you save this thing, by default, it will be automatically compatible with anybody that has Microsoft Office. So it gives you much better file compatibility. If you send somebody an ODT file and they have only Microsoft Office, they won't be able to open it. So you're basically writing a letter that they can't open. So you can see that there's some concerns with that. So as a general rule, I recommend that if you're going to use this tool, you tell it to save as a .doc file. You can also change not only your text documents, but your spreadsheets to a XLS file, which is the standard for Microsoft Office for spreadsheets, or for your presentation tool to save it instead of an ODP to a PPT, which is a PowerPoint standard file format for a PowerPoint document, okay? Now, I'm not going to change that right now because I want to show you how I can open other documents, okay? That's a little bit further on, but I just wanted to share with you. Now, there is a section in here also for Microsoft Office compatibility. The cool thing about this is you notice that it's going to take a WinWord document, a Microsoft Word document, and convert it automatically to be used by LibreOffice. Same thing, if you save it, it can also be used by WinWord or by Microsoft LibreOffice. Same thing with Excel, same thing with PowerPoint. You notice these options are selected by default, so I don't have to do anything to it. Okay? All right. So let me go to a Writer doc. In fact, well, let me go back to my presentation. And we will go to the first spreadsheet. page in the deck we have for Writer. Writer is a fully functional word processor. Well, what's a word processor? A word processor is a tool that you can use that will help you write a letter, that will automatically do things like spell correction, automatically do word line changes when you hit the end of the row. You can also change the fonts, you can change the size, you can underline, you can bold, you can highlight, you can insert pictures, you can put in tables. These are all kinds of things that are typically done in a standard Microsoft Office setting. You can do this also with Writer. It has all this functionality. Now, we're only going to talk about the very basics tonight. As I mentioned earlier, it stores this Writer, stores things in automatically as an ODT file. Microsoft Word wants to store it as a .doc or a .docx. Writer can open these, but Office cannot. So you can, as I just showed you, you can save your local, your LibreOffice files as a .doc or .docx, or set up the configuration to save it in the file Office formats as I just showed it to you. So I'm going to go into demo Writer. Now, this is a very basic demo. So we'll go through this demo and then I'll open the mics for questions, okay? All right, so let me close this again. I will go back to the chooser. Here's LibreOffice right here. I'll just launch it there. I will open the Writer document. Now I'm going to make this a little smaller because I want to get this out of the way of my menu bar up on the top here. Okay, I've got my Zoom patchwork up here, so I just want to get it out of the way. This is a very similar looking tool to Microsoft Office, but it has some differences. It is a word processor, which means it is what we call a WYSIWYG word processor. WYSIWYG. What you see on the screen is what you get. WYSIWYG. That is the functionality name for a desktop word processor. So a WYSIWYG device means what you see is what you get. Now, if you have a hard time seeing this, you might come back and say, wow, this is awful small. Maybe I'd want to make this bigger. So I could take my mouse and drag my mouse through this. And you see how I highlighted it? From this point, I can now go up to this section here, which is, if you see my mouse, you see where it says font size. I can now change the size of what I've got highlighted to something larger. So right now it's sitting at 12 point. I can go to 20 point. And you would agree with me that it is easier to see. Okay. I can change the style of the font. Right now it is set to what we call Liberation Serif. Not a very commonly used font, but we can go to commonly used ones like Arial Black. That's a real common one. Notice how nice and bold that got. Or I can change it to, what am I looking for? Here's a commonly used font for script. Here's another, and I'm just scrolling down here. I click the drop down arrow and I'm scrolling down through the different styles of text that are available. Calibri is a very commonly, oops, I didn't have that highlighted. Highlight it, let's go back to Calibri. And you'll be able to see what that looks like. Very commonly looking font. All right. Another one that's pretty common. And if you notice up here, you see how the ones I've selected recently are all at the top for me. So it's an easy way for me to get back to one that I've used recently. Let me go down here. I'm going to go down a ways. Here's something you might want to use if you were writing an invitation. Okay, so this is a formal looking like invitation type of script. We'll go down further again. I just passed it. Harlow solid italic. Kind of difficult to read, but what you see is what you get. A little bit difficult to read some of those letters. So I'll go down and I'll continue to find another one. Comic Sans, pretty easy. Now, why can I do this? Because I've got it highlighted. I can go and make any change I want to with it because I've got it highlighted. I can add it, make it bold. I can make it italic. You see where I'm clicking those letters up on the top menu? I can underline it. See what it looks like? If I go through and highlight it again, I can change the color of it by going to this option right here. It says it's currently set to dark red. You see that? But I can click that little drop down and change it to any color that I want to. I can change it to a light indigo. I can change it to a bright yellow. Kind of hard to see with the white background. Or I can change it to a dark purple. Whoops, didn't highlight it. Let's go back to that dark purple again. Doesn't look really purple, but it is kind of. All right. Now, I also have the capability with a word processor to undo my past actions. Notice right here that there is an arrow that says undo. It lets me go back. So if I click this one time, it'll let me go back to my last thing, which was that yellow. Undo again, goes back to the blue. Undo again, goes back to the red. Undo again, it goes back to the black. So you see how I can continue to go back and go back and go back, and it goes back and undoes all of those changes. But just as I've gone back, I can also go forward and do the one that I undid the last. So my next one says apply attributes. My next one would say apply attributes. My next one says apply attributes. See how I'm changing? This is all stuff that's been stored in RAM and allows me to make changes to this. Now, I'm going to delete this by highlighting it and backspacing over it. And I'm going to leave it at 20-point type. And I'm going to leave it at Comic Sans MS type so you can see what it looks like. And I'm going to type a sentence in here. Now, you would agree with me that there are some errors in this, right? Well, first off, let's make this a little bit easier to read. Let's get rid of that underline and the bold and the italics. So I will highlight it all. I will unclick bold. I will unclick italics, and I will unclick underline. And now you can see this a little bit better. These red squiggly lines mean that there is a mistake in spelling. And the built-in spell checker is telling me that it thinks that I've spelled something wrong. May not necessarily be accurate, but it thinks that I have, okay? This word should be the word good, but it doesn't recognize that as a misspelled word because the word goof is in its database. So I'm going to fix that. The way I'm going to fix that is I'm going to take my mouse cursor, which you see the flashing thing here. I'm going to take and put it right up here, right next to the mistake. I'll backspace over it and type in the proper letter. Okay, so I fixed one of my errors. Now, I can either go back and fix this word men's manually. The word should be men. Now, LibreOffice Writer gives me the availability of selecting what the word should look like. So I'm going to right click on this. And here are all the choices that it thinks could be the proper word. Do you see that? Yep, it's the second one down. I clicked on the word men and it fixed it for me. Same thing for this one. It's highlighted. I'll put my mouse on it, right click on it, and the first choice we have is neighbors. So I will fix that. Okay? So you would agree with me that this is a valid sentence. Now, let's say that I wanted to, let me put some more in here. All right. Now, let's just say that I'm writing a speech and I wanted to be deliberate on something. I wanted to say, now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their neighbors. It is the time for all to make peace. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their neighbors. It is something else. Now, rather than type that over again, I can highlight it and go up to a section right over here. This section right here. See where when I hover over it, it says copy. At the very top, do you see that? I see some people nodding their heads. Okay, so you can see that. I will left click copy. Now, nothing seems to have happened. Trust me, something did happen. It took this information that I've got highlighted and it copied it. I'm going to go and create another blank line. How did I do that? I went to the end of this one and I hit enter. And you see how the cursor went down one space? I'm going to put a blank space in by hitting enter again. Now, what I want to do is take what I've just copied and put it in right here. I will do that by going up to the section up here where it's called paste. You notice that my copy is now grayed out, but paste is now bolded. It is available for me to select. So I will click paste, and there's my line. I've just pasted it in place. Okay. Now, the nice thing about it is once you put something in memory for pasting, it will stay there until you put something else on top of it or you close the application. So if I hit the enter key and hit the enter key again and went up to paste, I can click the paste button and there's my information again for a third time. So I can keep this in here as long as I want to by just continuing it to paste it. As often as I want to. All right? So you can see that's a very valuable thing. I'm going to change this document a little bit. And I'm going to make this, I'm going to backspace out of this and get rid of this second line because I don't want it there. I'm just highlighting over it and I'm deleting it. Now, what I want to do is say, now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their neighbors. It is a time for all to make peace. It is a time for all to protect each other. It is a time for all to cherish now. This would be fine for a speech, but let's say that I was going to be sending this to a bunch of people and I wanted to get them to understand that these were all emphatic parts themselves. I could take and highlight all three of them and then do what we call a list. Okay, now there are a couple of different kinds of lists, and I'm going to go up here and we're going to, I think this is the one I want. Yeah. Okay, toggle unordered list. So when I click that, you will see that I now have what we call a bulleted list. See the bullets? It automatically indented it, and it created all three of these indented in an indented fashion. And if I hit the enter, put my mouse at the end of this next line and hit the enter, it is waiting for me to create a fourth entry in this list. Okay? If I hit enter again, it ends the bulleted list and allows me to continue with my text. Okay. I can also change this from a bulleted list to what we call a numbered list. Now, again, I'm going to go up to the top here and I will go over to what's called an ordered list. See how it changed it? I now have numbers. If I want to add this one as number 4, I backspace it to the last line. I hit enter and I have number 4 showing there. If I want to continue it as a separate line, I hit enter. Oops. And I can do what we call a outdent. Right here, you see 2 options as to what we can do. Or I can just backspace over the 4. Darn it. And continue. Okay? Now, this is all well and good. I can go and change the text. I can change the style. I can underline it. I can highlight it. Let me do a dark red highlighting. Okay. What's that do? Really just draws attention to it. So typically, if you're writing something and it's highlighted, you'll draw attention to it. I don't like it. I'm going to undo it. Let it go back to where we were. Now, if this was a Christmas letter, what typically a lot of people like to do is they like to put pictures in their Christmas letters, right? So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to enter and go back to my margin. I'll hit enter, so I got a couple of blank spaces in there. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a look at the top up here. I've got several options as to what I can do inserts. And you notice one of them says insert an image. See that up at the top? So I will click insert an image. It will put it right there at that spot where my cursor is. So I'm going to go up and click insert image. Okay. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. I've got to tell it where the image is. So this will take you knowing where you keep your images, like your pictures and things like that. So I'm going to go to where I keep my pictures, which is in my OneDrive area. In my pictures section. And I'm going to go randomly down to the bottom here and grab something. I have lots and lots and lots of pictures. All right. Now, it's really hard to see what these things look like. I got names, but I can't tell what they really look like. So I'm going to go over here to the more options. And I'm going to tell it to show me, instead of the details about the picture, I want to see large icons. Now, what I just did is, instead of details, get down, you can now see the actual pictures themselves. So I can grab randomly, I'm just going to grab this one. All right. And I'll click open. And what it just did is it put my picture in my document. Okay. It automatically centered it. And I'm ready to either move on and put more information underneath it, or type in information next to it, or go underneath it and do whatever. I can even take this picture and click on it and make it bigger or smaller. And you know how I stick it up in the text? See how it wrapped right around the text? That's what we call desktop publishing. It has the capability of wrapping text around a picture. Make it bigger this way. I don't like doing that because you see how elongated that came out? Not a good way of showing a picture. So I will click the back button and get back to its normal size. But if I wanted to keep the what we call aspect ratio of the picture accurate, I would take and drag a corner. And I will drag it that way. And you will see that the picture basically stays in the same basic aspect where it's still readable. Okay, let's just say that I'm done with this picture now. We've done some really basic things. We've done numbered lists. We've changed the size of our font. We've changed the style of our font. We've put in blank lines. We've talked about highlighting it with different colors. We can change the color of our fonts. We did that. And we put in a picture. I think you would agree, pretty much agree, that these are the basic functions of a word processor. What I want to do now is I want to save it. So I will go up to the option for saving. Now, if I click this down arrow right there next to save, I have the option to save this picture. Because I've never saved it before, and I can tell because up here it says it's Untitled 1. It has no name. If I click save, it's going to ask me what I want to save it as. What kind of a name do I want to get it? And where do I want to put it? Okay, so I'm going to save this. As example 1. And I'm going to save it on my desktop so I can go find it again. All right. It's just a quick place for me to store it because I'm not going to save this document on a permanent basis. And you notice that it's automatically saving it as a Libre Office document. I'm doing this deliberately. I want to show you something. So I will save it as a Libre Office document. It just saved it to my desktop right here. See down here? Example 1 ODT. Now, I also happen to have Microsoft Office installed on my system. So I'm going to open Microsoft Word. And then I'm now going to open my document. File, open. Where is my document? It is my OneDrive, my desktop. There it is, example 1. Okay, now when I click that, it can't do anything with it. It cannot do it because it doesn't understand it. Are you with me? It does not understand what to do with it. So what I'm going to do is get out of this. I'll go back, I'll double click my picture again. I'll open it with Libre Office. And now I will go, instead of doing save, I'll go up to save as. I will change it, instead of an ODT document, I will change it to a Word.doc file, save it again on my desktop. Close it. There's my example document. When I double click it, maybe, there it goes. You'll see that it opens Microsoft Office. And opens the document pretty much the same way I left it. Okay? I'm gonna see if I can figure out how to unmute everybody here and take any questions. Ralph, can you help me?
Folks, if you want to unmute yourself, you just need to either press the space bar on your PCs or click the unmute button in the lower left-hand corner. If you're on a tablet, it might be slightly different.
Does anyone have any questions about Writer? No? All right, well then let's move on. I'm going to open LibreOffice again. And we're going to go into the spreadsheet tool. Now, tell you what, let's go back to my presentation. The presentation tool is called Calc, and it's a fully functional spreadsheet tool. Now, spreadsheeting is something either you have a use for or something you don't have a use for. It's most commonly used when you're analyzing numbers and presenting the results of numbers. So I'm going to show you an analysis, and I'm going to show you a presentation of numbers. Calc is very similar to Microsoft Office Excel. It stores documents as .ods files. Again, this is different than the Microsoft Excel tool, which stores files as .xlx or .slxx. Just like Writer, Calc can open Microsoft Office Excel files, but Excel cannot open LibreOffice files unless you go through and save them as an XLS file or make the changes to LibreOffice at the very beginning to automatically save your spreadsheets as Microsoft Excel documents. So let's get into this, and I'll show you a little bit about what Calc does. Now I'm going to show you how to get into Calc by itself. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways. I can go to the search option here by clicking the little search box, and I can type in Calc. When I do that, I get a couple of choices. One of them being LibreOffice Calculator. I'm sorry, LibreOffice Calc. Another one called Calculator. Well, Calculator is not what I want, so I will go to Calc. I'll click it, and Calc will open for me. Now, I want you to look at this briefly, and I'm going to explain to you how this works and what it's doing. What you see here is a grid pattern. Things going across this way are numbered numerically, and these are called rows. Things going vertically go this way are labeled by alphabetic letters, and these are called columns. This junction of this column on this row is called location A1. Okay. This one here would be C11. You see how the C lit up, the 11 lit up, and I have in the location box here, in the name box, C11. Now, what each one of these things is called a cell. But what it is a location where you can store information. Now, you can either store one of three things. You can store data, which is a number or letters. You can store a symbol, or you can store a formula. Now, a formula would be, for instance, adding up the contents of a couple of cells, or subtracting one cell from another and storing the results in a third. You can multiply numbers between cells. You can subtract them. You can do all kinds of things in there. But each one of these boxes, each box up there has the capacity of storing information in it. Each cell holds something. Okay? Now, if in this particular cell, in C11, I can put a number in there. I'll put the number 11 in there, and you see that. If I click on that cell again, you notice up here in what we call the input line, 11 shows up. Okay? Up here, I can put in the word month. Now, typically, this should make you think that I'm looking at a column of months. Are you with me? You kind of see where this is a column, and 11 would be the 11th month, or November. But that's not necessarily true, because I could change this instead of 11, and I could change this and call this month 1, and go over to this one and call this month 2. Now, if I could spell, I'd be dangerous. Well, this is a good example, because if I go up here, you can see that that's misspelled. I got the red squiggly line underneath it. I could either right click on it and auto correct to month, or I can go up here to the name box and click my little line in there and backspace over to it and correct it. Hit the enter key, and I've corrected the contents of that cell. Now, what I just said is important. I'm not correcting the cell itself. I am correcting the contents of the cell. Because what we put in the cell depends on what we can do with something. So I can either have data, a label, or a calculation. All right? This particular thing is a label. I can't add or subtract the label. It's only used for descriptive purposes. This here, therefore, is a number, though. I can do arithmetic computations on a number. So if I say that month 1, and I go over here and I call it widgets, that means in month 1, I have 11 widgets. In month 2, I have 18 widgets. I could go over here and put a third entry in column F and call it difference. That would tell me what's the difference between this one and this one. How would I do that? Well, I first would say, let's take this number and subtract that number and store it there. Are you with me? I'm going to take the contents of this cell, subtract the contents of this cell, and put it in this cell. So where I put my information is always where I start writing my arithmetic formula. So I will click in that cell. Now, a calculation, a formula, is always started by using the equals key. Always, 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 always. It's started by first pressing the equals key. So I will go up and hit the equals key. Now, what did I say before? I'm going to take the contents of this cell. I'll click in it, and I will subtract minus the contents of this cell. You agree? I now hit the enter key and lock in my formula. It gives me the result of my calculation. However, if I go to the actual cell and want to see what's in the cell, it's not 7. It is the actual formula. See that up at the top? The formula does the work and displays for me the result. It makes sense? I'm seeing people nod their heads yes. So that's good. All right. So I'm going to take this a couple of steps further. Okay. Now, let's say that I'm tracking my inventory. So I'm now tracking inventory of the brackets I've got in stock. I'm going to say this month I had 7, and the next month I have 85. This month of pens, I had 15, but in month 2, I had 10. I had 55 pencils, and I had 6. Now, what did I do before? I took this number, subtracted this number, and came up with my difference, right? So I'm going to do that again, but I'm going to show you an easier way to do it. Remember the last time I did this? I selected the cell and I did the actual clicks. I said this one, I did equal sign, this one, minus this one, and hit enter. Well, I'm going to show you an easier way to do this. And that is using, just like we saw before in Writer, we're going to copy a formula and put it in the next cell down. All right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to click this cell. I'll go up to the copy option. And I will go down to the next cell, click on that, and then paste it. There's paste. And you see how 85 minus 7 gives me 78. I did not go through the individual clicks. Could I have? Absolutely. But you would agree with me that copying this information to this information made sense. Now, why does that work? Well, it's magic. It's what we call relative referencing. It said, take the information in this cell, which is this minus this. Go down to this cell and use the same reference, which would say this minus this, store it in here. I can also click in here, and just like I did before with my copying and pasting, I can go back up here to paste, copy that in there, and you see how 10 minus 15 gives me a -5. So I could say that my current inventory has a difference of 7. My current inventory of brackets has a net gain of 78. But my net inventory of my pens showed a loss of 5 pens over last month. So do you see how this represents numbers? Okay, now this is kind of a silly representation because it's not very useful unless you're maintaining an inventory. But I've got something that I did a little earlier that I want to show you that will actually bring a lot of sense into this. I'm going to close this, and I'm not going to save it because it's not important. But I'm going to open another one that I've had open earlier. And let me go into Libre Office. I'm going to go to the chooser, and I'm going to go to my budget sheet. Now, this is a document that I prepared earlier. This is something that is very commonly done with spreadsheets, and you could easily do it. This particular one allows you to create an annual budget. So you notice that I've gathered some information as to what I would typically expect to spend over the annual year. And I'm going to do some budgetary summarizations and some monthly summarizations. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you another range. You would agree with me that I could click on this cell and say, if I wanted a total of all of these amounts, I could go click the equal sign and say this one plus 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 this one, and I hit the enter key. Now, awkward, but gives me the total, right? Very awkward. Now, another way I can do this is by taking this and relatively copying it over to this location, and it will give me the totals of all of this information. So I will go to this cell, I will say, copy it, and put it in this location and paste it into place. There's my total. Now, I think you would agree with me that doing all of these one at a time was awkward, but I need to do the same thing this way across. I don't want to go through and add up each one of these and then copy them down. I'm going to show you an easier way to do it. And this is using an arithmetic function called sum. Now, this will allow me to take the contents of all of this information and put it in this one box in just one formula. Now, every calculation, every function, everything arithmetic always begins with the equal signs. So I will hit equal, and then I will type in the word sum. Now, we have got to tell the function what we want to make the sum of. So we're going to define what's called a range. That means where are we going to start summing and where we're going to end summing. So I'm going to start my beginning by clicking in the open parenthesis. Now I will go to my first field and I will slide my mouse through it to my last field. Now you see what it did here? It said the contents of B6 through I6. You see that? I will close my range by hitting the right side parenthesis. So my formula says equal sum B6 through I6. I will hit enter, and you will find that that is the sum of that number. Now, I could do that for this one, and I will do it the same way, just so we get the hang of doing this. I will do equal, I will type in sum, open parenthesis, highlight from here all the way through this to the end. Again, it's the sum of B7 through I7. I will hit my end parenthesis. And since the numbers are identical, it should come up to be the same thing. I could also copy this and paste it in all of the other cells where I want the same summarization relative to what's in these rows. I've highlighted the first one. I scroll down to the last one I want to put it in, and I will go up here to paste, and it copies my numbers all the way across. Okay? I will do the same thing for this number here. I will do equal sum at the start, at the end, close parenthesis, gives me a total. I can now copy this number, drag it all the across here, and come up with a paste and paste it in that. And you can see that I have more. I have a total for my mortgage for the year, my taxes for the year, my gas cost, my natural gas cost, my electric, my communication costs, my food, my entertainment, and my auto expenses. Okay, so that's my budget. Well, not really. What do I expect to spend for the entire year? What I would do is I would hit equal sum, open paren, go down that way, close paren. Now, how do I know that number is accurate? Wouldn't you agree that this number should be the same thing as this number across? How do we prove it? I'll do the same thing, and I'll call this cross-check, just so I know it's a cross-check. I will say equal all of these numbers all the way across, close parenthesis. I goofed. It's smarter than I am. What did I do wrong? Can anybody tell me?
You didn't open it with the parenthesis sign.
No, I didn't put the word sum in there. Okay, so it had absolutely no idea what to add up, what to do with it. But now that I've corrected my formula, you can see that my numbers are identical. So that tells me that this equals this. Now, that's all well and good having a budget. But let's just say that this was last year's budget. And I went in and calculated my actual expenses. So in December of last year, I went through every month, and I went through these, and I did whatever had happened to do for the year. So you notice that here in April, my taxes went from $600 a month to $750 a month. That my natural gas bills were high in January and February, but in March they went down and went down for the rest of the year, until October when they started climbing again. My electric kind of went parallel to that, my natural gas expenses. My communication stayed the same thing throughout the year. Not unusual because most of us have fixed packages for our internet and our phone and things of that nature. My food bill changes every month, and that's not at all unusual. So this month I spent $275. This month I spent $300. Down here in November, I spent $425. Why? Thanksgiving. Okay. I spent $400 in December. Why? Christmas. There you go. So you see that. Now, I have 1 month where I only spent $200. Well, that's really strange, but you notice that this bill went up considerably. Why? I went on vacation. My entertainment experience, my dining and entertainment experience went up higher. Okay. In January, I only spent $100 for dining and entertainment, but in February, I got the bills from January and said, oh my God, I've got to cut back. So I realized what I did here. So let's do the same thing with our totals that we did up here. Now, I want you to notice that I've got the same format here as I have for here. Okay, I've got my numbers followed by a blank space followed by my total. I can take and copy all of these numbers. I highlighted them all. I will copy them and I will put them right here and paste them in place. And you notice that I've copied across the board. I didn't have to do each individual column because I copied relatively. I said, copy all the stuff here and put it in here. Well, I did the same thing. Basically, I said, okay, go down here, use exactly the same format that you did here and put it here. Is the number the same? Sure, because I spent $1,200 each month. My actual is my budget. But my taxes went up. I only estimated to spend $7,200. I spent $8,500. I only estimated to spend $780 in natural gas, but I spent $1,000. So you kind of get an idea of where we are. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to copy this number and I'm going to paste it right down here. Gave me a 0. Why? Can anybody tell me why? Well, let's go up here and take a look at this. This says the sum of K6 through K17. So K6 through K17. If I go down here and take a look at this, this says the sum of K24 through K35. Well, that's absolutely accurate because what's in these numbers?
Nothing.
Nothing. So it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It did what I told it to do. What we need to do is put numbers in here. So what I will do is I will copy all of this information to this information. And there's my numbers. Okay, now, by looking at this, you can tell automatically that I went over budget for the year. But if I wanted to know over and under budget in each of the individual areas, I could calculate that as well. Okay, just by doing calculations, I could say, okay, for this one, I want to know, am I over or under budget? Well, I will take equals, I will take this number and I will subtract this number. And it says that I was under budget by $150. You see that? $27.15 versus $28.65. That's what I estimated to spend. So I'm going to take this and copy it all the way down. I will go up here to my copy. I will paste this all the way down. And that tells you sometimes I'm over, sometimes I'm under. Let me do it sum again of all of my overs and unders. I will take this, copy it to here, paste it there. And you see that I am over budget by $5,000. Okay. Now, this is all well and good, but if you were going to take this to your spouse who has absolutely no idea how to read a spreadsheet, you'd be up a creek. So what you need is a way to show these numbers graphically. We do that with graphs and charts. So we could do this by lots of different ways. We could say, okay, let's do it. We can do it by month. We could do it by category. We could do it by totals. We do lots of different ways. So I'm going to make a selection and say, I want to show my spouse how much I've spent actually for the year. Okay. So I will go and I will say, I want to take this information and I want to give it these titles. Okay. So this is the information I'm graphing. These are the titles. I will now go up here. I've got to move this down a little bit lower so I can see the options. One of these will say chart. There it is right there. See where it says insert chart? I'll click that and you'll see that it's going to give me the type of charts that it thinks would be most common for me to have. Okay. Now there's the chart. Does that make sense? Absolutely. It says that we spent $14,000 in mortgage and just over $8,000 in taxes and just under $1,000. Okay. You would agree that these numbers are difficult to read here though, right? So let's make this a little bit more friendly. Let's click on the next button. And it says, is this the way you want to see it? Yep. I want to see numbers on descriptions on the bottom and numbers on the side. That's what exactly is asking me. Let's click on the next button. Do I want to make any changes to this? Nope. Let's click on the next button. Let's give it a title. We'll call this monthly expenses. Okay? And we'll give it a legend on the bottom of the page. I'll click finish and pick this up and move it over so we can see it a little bit better. Now, I am looking at just my total, okay, because that says row 37. You see that down there? See where it says row 37 right there? I'm looking at my total, which is the row 37. Now, I'm going to take this and make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to do what's called put a data label on this. So I will right click on any of these boxes and I will go down to where it says insert data labels. And you see how it popped up each one of these numbers at the top there for me? Now we can take a look and see that, wow, we spent $1,000 in gas, $1,300 in electric, $2,400 in communication, $3,800 in food. You see where I'm going with this? You could easily take this chart to your spouse and show them graphically where they would have absolutely no idea what your budget and expenses look like, and show them what they were able to see. Now, I can change this chart as well. I will go into chart type. I did a right click on this. I will go into chart type, and I can change this to a pie chart. And now we have given it a much better idea for the year what we've spent in terms of a pie chart. But geez, it's hard to read those labels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the label, and I'm going to say format data label. And I'm going to say data label. Trying to figure out where to put it. Series name, value as a number, value as percentage. There it is, placement. Outside. And now you can see all of our data labels, our categories, and our actual numbers. Okay? So you would agree with me that this is a valid way and an ample use of a spreadsheet. We've got one more tool to talk about, and that's the tool I was using earlier. It's what we call, let me go back here. I will save this. I'll tell you what, I'm going to save it as a okay. Now, let's go back to LibreOffice. And we'll go back to the chooser. Instead of opening my existing spreadsheet, my existing presentation. Well, yeah, let me do that first. Let me do that first, and I'll share with you as to what Impress is all about. It's a presentation tool. That's what you're looking at right now. It's similar in concept to Office PowerPoint. It stores documents, it's ODPs. This is the same thing we talked about earlier. It's different than Microsoft Excel. No, it's different than Microsoft PowerPoint. Which stores files as PowerPoint or PTX formats. Just like PowerPoint, sorry about that. Impress can open a PowerPoint files, but MS Office can't do it. We've been through there before. I'm going to save this so I don't lose it. And I'm going to show you how to open an Impress or create an Impress file, an Impress presentation. I'll go back to LibreOffice. Go back to my chooser. Well, let's not do it this way. I showed you once how to open it with the chooser. I showed you how to open Calc with the search tool. I'm going to go to the application list in Windows 11, click on All Apps, go down to LibreOffice, HIJKL, and then go click on Impress and open Impress by itself. Now the first thing it does is when I'm opening a brand new presentation, it asks me what my template should look like. Okay, so templates are pre-created graphics, backgrounds, if you want to say, with certain styles and certain fonts and certain characteristics that I could use to create a presentation. Now you notice that the one I used was this one. It was called Blue Curve. I tried to select a theme that would show up well if I'm doing a presentation over video. So I did that one. I wouldn't want to do something that's all white because it might wash out a little bit. I wouldn't want something with a lot of graphics because it probably won't show those graphics as well. So I'm looking for something that is pretty simple and not too dark. So if I do dark, it's not going to show up well at all. You're going to be struggling to see it. So I'm going to use Midnight Blue. Once I select it, I select Open. And now it's asking me to begin my presentation. Click the title. Of the presentation, click to add text. You can't really tell, but there's a red squiggly line there. I'll right click on it, auto correct to workshop. Off we go. Red squiggly line there. I guarantee it won't know about SCHCC. So I'm going to go into it manually and backspace it. My next slide is already there. It's what we call a bulleted slide. Now, you see these graphics here? I can put an image, I can put a chart, a table, a graph, or I can even put an audio or video slide in here. So I can make this a movie if I wanted to. For when I present it, the movie automatically plays. I'm not going to do that right now because we've already shown how you can do inserts, but I am going to put just a couple of lines in this. And I'll call this page done. Now, if I go to slide 3, it gives me a different title page. Well, I don't want to use that. So I will go over here, I will right click on this, and I will say, show me different layouts. So I can either make it a blank slide, a title only, a title with content, a title with 2 content, lots of choices. What we have up here is title with content, so I'm going to do title with 2 content. I don't like that, so I'm going to go back and say, it's not what I wanted either. I don't like this at all. So I'm going to select it and delete it. The heck with you. You're not going to give me what I want. I'm going to select a new slide. So I will go up here. I will right click, say, give me a new slide. And it gives me exactly what it had last. Now I can change this to be, again, layout, title, and 2 context. You see, this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted a title with 2 equal size boxes. I now can do as well as I can go over here and do X, Y, and Z, and AB. So I've got 3 lines there. Now, could I put a picture in on top of this? I absolutely could. If I move this down a little bit so you can see the top here, you see that I have the same options to insert an image if I choose to. So I could go in here, backspace over that to get that number out of here, click the insert image, go back to where my images are. Remember those pictures? I'll go all the way down to the bottom. Son of a gun, I can't see what the pictures look like. I'll go over here to the more options and I'll say, give me large icons to look at. Go all the way down to the bottom and there's the kid, there's the pictures. Okay, let's do that one. And there's a picture of Santa. Okay, now I have wiped out my text. So I can now go down here, grab a hold of this picture, make it smaller. Where did I put that? I wiped out my text. See how the AB is in there? I printed over it. So it didn't work exactly the way I wanted to, but you get the general idea because I put it inside the content. I really should not have had any letters in there. I should have just put the picture in by itself. But you get the idea that you can go ahead and do this. Okay. If I choose, I can put in videos, movies, sounds. I can actually animate these things as well. For instance, you probably have seen where someone opens a presentation and the text fades in or flies in from the side. You can do that. That's what we call animation. I can highlight these and go over to the, where is it? Not there. And what I'm doing up here is I'm just looking until one of these gives me animation. It's here someplace. Okay, well, I don't know where it is. So let me do this. Help. LibreOffice help. Read help online. So I loaded LibreOffice's webpage. And I can go, once it loads, I can type in ANIMATE calc. And this will give me the instructions on how to impress some of the features. Okay. So I can click on any of these and it will tell me how to use it. So if I click on using features, creating presentations, all of these things will give me a little training class on how to use the tool. Okay. All right. I am at time for the evening. I again would invite you to unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you might have. Anybody? Okay, this was a lot of information in an hour and a half. This is really supposed to be something to wet your whistle. In the past, the club has run full hour and a half sessions on Writer, on Calc, and on Impress. And we can do those again if there's enough demand for them. This is a very, very highly integrated tool. It can do a lot, and I've just run over them really quickly. I am by no means an expert in using any of these programs, but you don't need to be an expert to deliver some of the very basic things. You can absolutely write a Christmas letter with this. You can print it. You can change the style of the font. You can change the style of the underlines, of the size of the font. You can insert pictures. You can create a spreadsheet. You can track widgets if you want to, or you can do something a little bit more realistic, like create a budget. If you have an interest in this, please let Ralph or Shelley know, and I'd be happy to come back and run a more extensive class in each one of these, being about an hour and a half of just in depth of each one of these programs. So I'll leave you in closing, and thank you very much for the opportunity to have. Oh, it's a question. I see you, Louis.
Can you give us again the website where to find to download the program? You gave it in the beginning.
Yes, it's called Libre, Libre Office.
Yeah.
Libre Office.org.
.org. I was not
.org.
.org. Okay, that's
.org. Yes, sir.
okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And in fact, one of the nice things I didn't even mention is that once you install it, it will tell you when you open it if there's an update for it. It will continually update itself. So it just asks, all you do is say, yep, go ahead and do it.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity of having presented tonight. And I wish you all a pleasant evening. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will. It's an excellent presentation.
Thanks, Shelley. You're very kind.
Yeah.
Ralph,
Sure,
plug me in
appreciate it.
anytime you need me.